Toronto is ranked one of the biggest housing bubbles in the world. So what on earth does this mean? How can you even define such a thing? And where does Canada sit in the rankings for that as well? So we're going to go through all that data in today's stream. So let's take a look. So let's go back here. So we're back in 2019. So I wanted to do this because I wanted to show you a comparison of where we were before all the stimulus and everything happened during 2020. And you can look at the house price rent ratio in Canada was out to lunch back in 2019. So the house price rent ratio, what is it? This indicator shows how fast housing prices are rising relative to how much renters pay. If housing prices rise way faster than the income generated by that house, i.e. rent, then it may not be sustainable over the long term. And essentially, that's a good way of looking at it, because when you look across cities in Canada, you cannot rent them out and get a decent return. Like if you were to put 20, 30, 40% down in Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, you would still not be making money on your rental here in 2023. So that just goes to show how crazy things have become out of whack and got out of whack in these different cities. But you have to realize that if somebody is saying they're quote unquote investing in a house within Canada in 2022 or 2023 or even back in 2019, you have to ask the question, well, why would they do that if they're not even going to be able to collect the rent which you would need to cover your expenses? Why would they do that? And it's because they're not investing. They are speculating on future prices. They don't even realize what they're doing because they're in this mania. It's like this psychotic mania of buying houses, buying houses. And you know, the problem is when so many investors are buying houses, or quote unquote investors, but we'll call them speculators, because that's what essentially they are, even though they don't know it, then that takes up a lot of the supply. It takes a lot of the supply away from people that want to buy houses. And that drives up the prices massively. And then you're led to believe that there's a massive supply shortage and all the rest of it. All those mechanics that you hear in the mainstream media all the time, giving you excuses of why the housing market only goes up. So you can see that Canada tops the index there, right by it, New Zealand as well, Australia, Sweden, Norway, already all on there as well. And we've also talked about Australia and New Zealand in the past. And then the house price income ratio, I like this as well that they've put together here. This indicator shows how fast housing prices are rising relative to how much money people make. If housing prices rise too fast, it may become unsustainable as people can no longer afford to live. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what has happened essentially. And Canada once again is topping that index pretty much. So it's not really good. People can't afford to live, and that has been stretched to the absolute maximum in 2022 and 2023 with inflation and all the other pressures that have essentially just eroded people's real wage growth. And now they are just staring down the barrel of a gun in many places. Because that is just essentially what has happened. That is why the food bank usage has just skyrocketed. You're talking about one of the quote-unquote richest countries in the world where food bank usage is absolutely skyrocketing and people can't even afford a $500 expense. One in four people cannot afford a $500 unexpected expense, and we're going to get into that in a couple of days' time, and also what's going on with rents, because it is absolutely insane. So let's flip over now to 2022, and we can see that they ranked it again, and Toronto was top. Toronto topped the charts and took the crown, and it was 2.24 on their index. And then Vancouver was also up there, and you can see all these other, and they basically got the bubble risk, and this is the real estate bubble index by UBS. And essentially UBS has been talking about this for a long time, and Toronto and Vancouver have been appearing on it for a long time. And people have just been thinking, yeah, there's a lot of people who've been saying that we're in a real estate bubble for a long time, but housing prices keep going up, keep going up, keep going up. But really, what ends that is a recession, some sort of economic crisis, which it looks like we're heading into, because you've got private debt to GDP that's peaked, you've got household debt to GDP that has peaked. Those are not good signs at all. They happened in the US before 2008, about a year before all the crisis happened. So, and these bubbles and banking crises have happened all over the world. They're not just specific to the US. That's just one of the most recent memorable ones that people can think back to. So it's kind of crazy. So if you go down here, you can see the overinflated markets that they're talking about. And ranked number 1 is, of course, Toronto. And then you've also got number 7, Vancouver. And you've got LA here as well. It's interesting about LA because I looked a while ago and tweeted this out, that realtor registrations in Toronto were way over registered realtors in Los Angeles. So you have more registered realtors in Toronto, which has a way smaller population than Los Angeles. And again, Los Angeles is a frothy market. It's number 11 on this index. And, when you're looking at the amount of rent that people can collect versus the expenses of carrying that house, and you're looking at the rent that's being charged versus the amount of income that people are bringing in, you really understand that we're at a crisis point. And you'd have to be like a chicken with your head cut off in order to invest in this sort of market. If you think it's investing, it's really not. It's just speculating. And, even a lot of people, first-time home buyers, who would buy into the market as soon as a little bit of activity comes up, and you essentially have that bull trap, which happened in certain markets in 2007, and I've been talking about for a while. That's going to essentially dupe a lot of people into getting into the market, especially those first-time home buyers, with that fear of missing out that hasn't really subsided. It's just the fact that prices have been going down. So it's easy to sit on the sidelines and wait when prices are going down. But boy, when prices start to turn again, all that FOMO just comes screaming back. And the real estate industry, they're going to run with it. They're going to play on your emotions because they know how to manipulate people. They've become experts at manipulating people. I mean, this is exactly why they list homes below value and get people to bid for them, even though they know the house is worth $1 million. They list it at $500,000 purposely because they know human behavior is just going to dictate that likely the bids are just going to go way over $1 million and they're going to sell it for more than it's worth. I mean, the crazy thing is that they imagined that in a lot of these cases they got the appraisals, and they got the appraisals back then because prices were going up. But now the banks are, they're starting to tighten their belts a little bit and say, this housing market, we don't really like it so much. And then you've got other banks that will come in and say, we'll take over. And, it's just a race to the bottom, in my opinion. But, this just really shows it for what it is, which is one of the biggest bubbles in the world. And I think people really need to take note of that and realize that if you're in one of the biggest bubbles in the world, the crash will also be one of the biggest in the world. There are bubbles all over the world right now. And the thing is, they will all crash, but a lot of them are going to crash a lot harder, like Australia, New Zealand, Canada. So, and there's a lot of good videos that I've done in the past that you may want to check out because they're really, really interesting if you look at the reasons of what happened in 2008, why Canada home prices didn't collapse. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, you might like that one there. You might also like that one there. Thank you so much for watching and all the support that you give to the channel. Please leave a comment below. I love chatting with you there, and I'll see you in the next one.